Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, Purple Pill Philosophy has with us tonight Dr. Sarah Salviander, astrophysicist and cosmologist.
Hello.
Tell the dear audience about yourself.
Okay. So for a lot of people probably know me from Twitter. I'm a former atheist, raised atheist in Canada, became a believer, at least a theist, through my scientific work as a student. And then later on as a graduate student, I became a Christian, just full on, and got very interested in ministry, finished my PhD. I was a research scientist for many years, studying supermassive black holes and quasars. And I have recently launched into doing ministry full time while still doing some research part time on the side.
Interesting.
How did you come to believe in God? And how did you become a Christian in particular?
Okay, so I was raised very atheist by atheist parents, and went to university that way. About halfway through my undergrad degree in physics, I remember I was in California doing some research at UC San Diego on cosmology, and just realized as I was walking across campus one day that just the incredible confluence of things that needed to come together in order for us to not only ask this question about the universe. We were looking at just how much normal matter there is in the entire universe, but that the question was answerable, that we could discover it. And to me, it just seemed, how could a universe this intelligible that opens itself up to scrutiny like this just be an accident? And I remember I became a theist on the spot. I just stopped dead in my tracks and said, wow, I believe in God. And that was a really cool moment. Now, as for how I became a Christian specifically, so it was probably another 6 years that I didn't really think too much about it. Like, what is it about? What do I know about God? What specifically, what religious tradition would I be interested in? Until I saw a book called The Science of God. I just saw it randomly in a bookstore and thought, hey, I'm into science and I believe in God now. Picked it up. It's by Gerald Schroeder, who's an Orthodox Jew, and he's also a nuclear physicist. And so he wrote about how the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, matches up pretty well with modern science. And I was just blown away. And I remember thinking, I can take the Bible seriously now. And once I got through the Old Testament, I thought, well, hey, why not continue with the New Testament? And as luck would have it, I met a pastor at that time, and he encouraged me to attend his church. I took some classes and did quite a bit of study on the reliability of the New Testament, that whole thing, and I was convinced. And in 2006, I was baptized a Christian.
I know you appreciate the polemical nature of Genesis, but you also say that you view the 6 days as literal but expansive over the 14 billion year period. Explain what events fit into each of the so-called days.
Okay, so that's quite a bit. I've counted something between 26 and 30 separate events in Genesis that are each scientifically verifiable. So that it would take most of the time here to go through all of that. But you have things, for instance, like light being separated from dark. Well, first of all, the creation of the universe, light being separated from dark. Then you get the formation of the earth, and then the formation of continents and oceans, and it all happens very stepwise, the way it's described. And I had a colleague years ago who, when she was working at a bookstore as an undergrad, decided to take all of the science books and put them in the order in which these topics appear in Genesis. And she was pretty stunned to see that it was more or less in the same progression that science says these things happen. And she's not even remotely Christian. So she was pretty astounded by that. And I can say this is exactly the case that Gerald Schroeder lays out. And if anyone's interested, they can go to my website, sarahsalviander.com, and I've got links to my ministry website, and I've got a whole slideshow on this. And you match up these events very well. Now, the main thing about taking Genesis literally, besides the fact that all of these verifiable statements are in the correct order, which itself is astounding enough, what really compelled me was Schroeder's argument that due to the relativity of time that arises from the stretching of the universe as it expands, this is how you get the effect of 6 literal creation days from God's perspective, amounting to about 14 billion years, according to our reckoning from Earth, from our position in space-time now, looking back in cosmic history. That was the real stunner to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember from a previous talk that I actually had found myself going over that an article that I had brought up in the debate, not the debate, the talk beforehand, by Mr. Hemet Mehta.
The Kirk Cameron of atheism.
Yeah. Basically, what many atheists I've seen who criticize you, they say is that, if, basically they accuse you of redefining science in a way so you can make up all the answers. Basically stuff like Adam and Eve weren't the first humans, God didn't create the world in 6 24-hour days, snakes don't talk, a great flood didn't wipe out humanity. All that stuff. And, light wasn't created before the sun existed.
Well, so they obviously have not studied this very deeply. What I have noticed with most critics is that they either get the science horribly wrong or they get the biblical theology horribly wrong. Now, who am I going to listen to? An online kind of armchair critic or somebody with a PhD who is an Orthodox theologian and has studied this literally his entire life and translates directly from biblical Hebrew. I mean, I spent years studying this. I have not seen any substantial criticism from these people. Now, that's not to say that there aren't points on which you could criticize or that you could argue about. There are, because biblical scholarship is very difficult. But these are generally people who have PhDs in ancient Near East studies or in biblical Hebrew, not these, armchair critics. I mean, these criticisms from these guys are usually so bad. It's like, I'm not even sure how to respond to some of them. If you want to pick something in particular, I can try to address it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, another criticism that I see is that, I remember you had said that in a Twitter post. Let me see what you directly said. All right. It said Christianity is the best explanation for evil. That's what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And Hemet Mehta had said, I suppose it's comforting to believe all actions, even disturbing ones, are part of God's master plan. When you believe that, there's literally nothing you can do to stop it. It's the lazy way out. No wonder Christians send thoughts and prayers after mass shootings. It's literally all they have at their disposal.
Now, that's just, again, a misinterpretation that's really silly. I don't think that people choosing to commit acts of evil is all part of God's plan. Obviously, God wills us not to commit evil. This guy's got it completely backwards. But what you do is you acknowledge that evil acts are evil, as opposed to, these are just, if you have a subjective morality, you can just say, well, it's something I don't personally like, but it's just what this, it's the natural course of things in a godless universe. I mean, how do you explain why something is evil or bad in a naturalistic context? You can't. It's impossible. And to acknowledge the actual tangible existence of evil is not lazy in any sense. If anything, it gives us a mandate to do all that we can to resist it. You know, this person has gone completely backwards.
Well, I mean, it
Well,
makes
yes,
it seem like all Christians do is pray when you forget that Christians run the charities that help out these people.
Yes, I know. Is one a wonderful example is William Wilberforce, who this was centuries ago in England, who upon becoming a recently converted Christian, because we are told in Scripture that we were created to do good works, and this is the fruit of faith, right? He started looking for a cause, and his cause was to put an end to the international slave trade, the worldwide slave trade. Okay, the mass movements of people from one place to another to force them to work, right? And that was his cause, that because we're all made in the image of God, each one of us is an image bearer of the divine, that it is absolutely wrong to enslave someone, for someone to be property of another person. And so he devoted something like 25 years of his life going before Parliament in England to beg the British government to put an end to the worldwide slave trade. And he finally was successful. They used the force of the British Navy to put an end to that. I mean, to say that all Christians do is thoughts and prayers, I mean, that's an insult. It's ridiculous. You know, sometimes all you can do literally is to pray for someone or for something, but Christians all the time take action, whether it's charity, ministering to people, getting out there and physically helping. You know, that is just a ridiculous accusation.
Yeah, it is pretty much. So, what's some other questions that you got,
there's over
Coach?
300 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and half of which are orbited by planets, and on average, two of a star's planets are suitable for life. And there's a trillion stars in our neighbor galaxy, Andromeda, and the galaxy with the most stars has 100 trillion, is it? Among 2 trillion galaxies so far. So, how do you respond to people who think it's more likely that we're alone in this vast universe than there being billions of alien civilizations elsewhere?
Okay, so yeah, those numbers sound really big until you really start to look at the math. Now, I will admit to being pretty agnostic on this question. I don't know if there's other life out there. I don't know how likely it is, and really nobody knows how likely that is. I'll just point out, I think it's pretty astounding when you think about, okay, there's two options, right? Either we're completely alone, it's the only intelligent life in the known universe, or there's somebody else out there. Either one is pretty astounding, right? I mean, either of those options is pretty crazy. So either way it goes, it's really interesting. Now, as for the likelihood, again, those seem like big numbers, but when you begin to look at a Drake equation kind of a thing, so this is the famous equation where you have all of these different parameters, how likely, something like having the right kind of star, being in the right kind of galaxy, being in the right part of the galaxy, all these different parameters that you have to put into this equation to say how likely is it that you're going to have a planet that's suitable for advanced life. Now, the problem is there could be anywhere from dozens to thousands of these parameters that go into that Drake equation. We don't know how many parameters there are, and even just estimating the biggest number that each one of these parameters could be is one, right? Representing 100% odds. So, and what you're going to get for almost all of these parameters is a number less than one. And what do you get when you keep adding or multiplying numbers together that are less than 1? You're getting diminishing odds. And once you get to the point where you've got these teeny tiny odds of getting a planet that is suitable for the only kind of advanced life that we're aware of, that number absolutely just overwhelms even an estimate of how many planets are out there in the known universe. I would say the odds are not great. But then again, as a Christian, it's not to me so much about the odds as whether this would be something that God would have willed. And I have no idea. I don't think anybody else knows either.
Or that each life inhabited civilization has their own Jesus of some sort.
So being that this entire universe is subject to the law of decay, I would say that, you could probably extrapolate from that the entire universe is kind of under this curse. But, C.S. Lewis explored this idea in the Space Trilogy. I don't know if you've read that. And it's a science fiction series where he explores, well, what if there are other planets out there where the creatures there are unfallen and enjoy direct communication with God? And so it's a whole different perspective on that. We just don't know.
Especially considering the universe began 14 billion years ago, and only 200,000 years ago did we evolve to our modern form, and after 2 million years of human evolution in turn. The universe has about 5 billion years left before the heat death or the whatchamacallit, the
Big crunch.
no,
did you say 5 billion years?
Yes, somewhere around there.
5 billion years till the sun, fries the earth. And, the heat death, if that happens, is way down the road. I think we're talking trillions of years.
Yeah. Or I mean the collide with Andromeda. Like, how long do you think man will last until that happens?
Okay, well, now what a lot of people don't realize is that galaxy collisions are not that destructive of stars. So galaxies collide all the time, and especially in the past when things were closer together. And interestingly, because the stars and galaxies are so far apart relative to their sizes, you're going to get virtually no star collisions. So in principle, if that collision occurs before the Earth is fried by the sun, the chances are pretty good that the Earth would be just fine. So, any sort of imminent collision with Andromeda is not really a problem. The sun frying us is the more immediate problem, or being struck by an asteroid.
Or both.
Or both. Let it all happen. It could all happen.
Just as an asteroid's about to hit the Earth, the sun explodes.
There you go. Salt in the wound.
How long do you think man has until that happens?
Okay, so I'm going to refer to Hugh Ross here, who's another astrophysicist believer who's got a ministry called Reasons to Believe, and he's talked quite a bit about this. Now, he has made a pretty good case for us being in the optimal window right now. It's a relatively short window, just a few thousand years long, during which humankind can flourish, meaning that we could have billions of people relatively comfortably on this planet. And eventually, we're talking only thousands of years from now, that window is going to close. This is because we have an ice age cycle, right? And during these ice ages, the Earth is not all that hospitable to large numbers of human beings. So he's convinced, we've got just in total a few thousand years to carry out what's called the Great Commission, which is to get as many believers on board as we can. So irrespective of even the Earth blowing or the sun igniting the Earth or galaxy collisions, this brief window of human flourishing is going to end.
Herbert got 4,000 years until another ice age comes, somewhere around there.
On that scale, yeah. I don't know what the exact number is. Hugh Ross
A movie?
probably something.
Wait, it's gonna be 4,000 years until we get another Ice Age movie.
Another Ice Age movie? No,
Show.
that's probably just around the corner.
Show.
Yeah. So no, another Ice Age. Roughly, we're talking. I don't know, on the order of 1,000 years, something like that, a few thousand years.
Yeah. So I remember you had been talking about how you're a big Star Trek fan.
I am indeed.
And Star Wars.
And Star Wars.
And 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Well, my enthusiasm for 2001 has waned somewhat. I talked about this with Brass last time, that I used to love that movie. I mean, it's a beautiful movie to watch. It's just got a stunning vision.
It's one of the best ever made.
It is just wonderful. And I had the privilege a few years ago of meeting Keir Dullea. That's the actor who played Dave in the movie. I just happened to be in Roswell, New Mexico during the International UFO Festival, and there he was signing autographs. He even hugged me. It was great. We talked for a long time. He's a super smart guy, really nice. And, it just, and of course, he was wonderful as Dave, the main character of the movie. But I was kind of, saddened to discover that I don't really enjoy watching that movie anymore. I went to go see, I don't know if it was like an anniversary showing of the movie at a really nice theater. And about 20, 30 minutes into the movie, I started to get kind of anxious, like getting almost sort of a panic attack. And it's like, oh, I just want to get out of here.
Why is
because
that?
It's one of those movie was so cold and nihilistic, and just
That's
like,
why I like it.
this is the universe without God, and it just it's like I just got so depressed. It's like I just can't watch this movie anymore.
It's one of those movies that you can you actually think that you're in space and you can just forget the world.
You can't. I mean, it is a stunning piece of art, but oh my gosh, if you really start to think about what it would be like to live in that world, I couldn't do it. It just, I actually, as cheesy as it is, I have started to like 2010, the sequel, much better. Even though it's kind of a dated 80s movies that in terms of like stylistically it doesn't hold up as well, but it's just a more cheerful movie to watch. More human.
I mean, yeah. I remember though, I mean, isn't that a lot that people can say about the sci-fi in general? Like, because they said there was a lot of nihilistic themes in Star Wars. Not Star Wars, Star Trek.
I didn't find Star Trek nihilistic at all. I can kind of superimpose my generally theistic worldview on the old Star Trek. Now I got to clarify that I am an original series kind of person. Yeah. I like the Next Generation a lot, but my heart is, the original series. I don't have any problem imagining this taking place, in a theistic sort of universe.
I can never understand why people get into it. It just drags on and very little happens.
In which?
Oh, the series in general. I've watched a reasonable amount, and I just couldn't get into it.
You're just not into Star Trek. I get it. I've got a lot of friends who just can't stand it. I grew up with Star Trek. My parents were total nerds. My brother and I loved it. I still love it. Yeah, but I get it. It's not for everyone.
I believe you had said, in fact, I believe you said, in fact, that you were an objectivist growing up.
For a little while. So, I was raised atheist. My parents were initially socialist political activists. And later, my dad in particular veered libertarian and introduced my brother and me to Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy, which is very atheistic at its core. And so I would say I would have considered myself an objectivist uh, until I was a freshman in university in my early 20s. And at that point, I kind of outgrew it.
Eh. So, I mean, that tends to be what happens. People become objectivists, and then once their IQ gets above 80, they drop it.
You know, it was, and I do not mean this in an insulting way. It is a wonderful philosophy for smug teenagers, and that it was perfect for me there. But, once you start to mature and you start to ask a lot of questions, it just didn't hold up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how well immersed are you in the Star Wars galaxy?
I'm sorry, how much am I into the Star Wars galaxy?
Yeah.
So meaning like I love the 3 original movies. I can say that.
Yeah, the new one sucked.
I did not like the prequels, although I want to admit I'm starting to kind of love the prequels just for their sheer cheesy badness. I watch them with riff tracks all the time, and they're so much fun.
No, compared to the sequels, the prequels are pretty good. The first one's mainly just for '90s nostalgia, but I like Revenge of the Sith. That holds up along with the originals.
You think so?
I was wondering though, since you are a scientist, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he has this sort of stick where whenever there's a science movie that comes out, he always has to nitpick the science out of it.
Yes, that
Do
kind of
you ever find yourself doing that when you're watching science movies?
almost never. So for me, the more removed a movie like that is from reality, the better, because I just want to immerse myself in the story. And in fact, I find the movies that try to be much more accurate, I can't get into them. Like Interstellar and The Martian, I really appreciate what they were trying to do, but I can't get into them.
I couldn't either. There's just I like Moon.
No, I don't think I've seen that one. Is that with Sam Rockwell?
Yeah.
It's just, again, if it looks like it's trying to be accurate, I can't do it. I like space movies to be action and cheesy and just kind of over the top. That's my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, who would have ever thought that, when we pay to see a movie, we want to escape from reality, not
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Well,
yes.
Like when you watch history stuff, you can. Well, that's why channels like History Buffs exist, because he nitpicks all of them and tells you the real history of it. Background.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that somebody's saying, "Hey, this was a fun movie, but in reality, here's what happened." And so I don't mind kind of like general sort of commentary. Well, in reality, here's how we would handle, faster than light travel or something. But as long as a movie doesn't get it egregiously bad, I think the only movie that ever annoyed me that way was, it's the one with Vin Diesel, where they're on the planet where it's perpetually night. I can't remember what that was.
With Pitch Black.
Pitch Black and the Chronicles of Riddick. Yeah, so I think
Riddick.
it's that movie where they had an off-equator ring system around the planets. It's like, physically that just can't happen. Or, how on a planet that's perpetually night can they just have these, periodically nocturnal creatures? So that kind of thing annoys me because it makes no sense. But Millennium Falcon going into hyperspace, that doesn't bother me at all.
I mean, to me, I've always found that, to me, it only really bothers me is if they're trying to depict it as being accurate.
Yes.
I mean, if they're not, and if they're just like being cartoonish on purpose, then I don't really care that much. Because,
and as long as they're consistent, that they don't break their own rules that they've established for that universe, then I'm okay.
And then there's stuff like Alien, which is the first one's supposed to take place decades from now or a century.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it's so 70s and 80s.
I know, and honestly, I love it for that reason. It just because so the way it has to work is that it's got to look kind of gritty, like these are space truckers, right? And in the 70s, when the movie was made, that's how, that's what people could relate to as being a gritty kind of blue collar sort of environment. And so in that sense, it kind of works, even though, yes, if it actually took place 100 years from now, it would look quite different. But, I can forget that.
Basically the same time that Hunger Games takes place.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, boy, I hope I'm not around when all that happens.
I remember there was this alien invasion movie by M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, yes. I know which one you're talking about.
I remember the most hilarious thing is that what he made the aliens' weakness.
Yes, the one thing that is so abundant in our atmosphere, water.
Water.
Yeah.
Yes. You went to a planet mostly filled with water, and that's the one thing that can kill you.
Yes.
Not like War of the Worlds, where what their weakness is air.
Right. I so wish that he had found something else that made more sense, because I actually really enjoyed the setup in that movie. It was creepy and scary, especially when you saw the alien for the first time. I remember I actually kind of jumped. He did that so well. And if he would have just found something other than the most abundant substance on the planet that they were, susceptible to, I think it would have worked.
Well,
So
it was
close.
they had two weaknesses. One, water, and two, wood.
Wood? Oh, like baseball bats or so? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson beat him up. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny.
How do you like it?
I always thought funny is that it's always funny that the role that Mel Gibson is going to be known for is being Jesus in the Passion of the Christ.
That wasn't him. He directed it.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was the movie he directed. I always find that's one of the things that he's best known for.
His memorable role was Mad Max.
Oh yeah, that was good.
And we watch the Lethal Weapon movies every year, all of them.
It's more like is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not?
It is absolutely a Christmas movie, yes. We watch it every Christmas Eve.
Just making sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And, how do you like?
I mean, it is a Christmas movie, definitely.
Yeah, and there's also the also Blade Runner, which was supposed to happen last year, but was equally dystopian, but without all the technology.
Oh, right, Blade Runner. Yeah, that movie I saw that when I was a kid, and it scared me. It was just like, oh, geez, I hope the future isn't really like that. It was, I mean, again, like 2001, a visually stunning movie, a wonderful piece of art, really depressing.
I recently found out, why is it that, because this was actually getting to me, but why is it that men seem to be so attracted to anime? Like, like the cartoons.
Like Akira and Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And, and I found out that one idea is because of the eyes.
Uh-huh.
The idea is that since they have the noticeable big eyes, that men are very visual learners. They tend to be.
Yeah.
That to see the eyes like that, it sort of, elicits more like relatability to the characters.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that.
I just love Japanese culture in general.
Yeah, I mean, I like Japanese culture as well.
But can somebody explain to me how Pokemon is supposed to make any kind of sense whatsoever?
Yeah, you're asking the wrong person here. I had one of my really good friends when I was working at UT. He got a degree in Japanese studies. He was fluent. Went to Japan. He loved anime. and after years of talking to him, I still am no closer to understanding exactly what the appeal is. I really like Japanese things too. I like the culture, it's very interesting, but I just don't quite understand the appeal of things like Pokemon and anime. I don't get it.
Well, what you call Pokemon, Michael Vick calls Friday.
Calls what?
Friday.
Oh, okay.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
but back to space matters. How do you like games like Mass Effect or Halo or any of them?
I don't actually play video games. I am a board gamer.
Uh,
Yep. So most of you have grown. I wish I enjoyed video games. When I was a kid, I played hundreds of hours of Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was pretty much it for me, aside from, classic arcade stuff. I definitely am big into, historical and war and strategy board games, not
like
video,
Battleship.
not Battleship. Yes, when I was about 6 years
space.
old. No, like we just got Gloomhaven, which if you try to pick up the box weighs approximately 80 pounds and will probably take me the rest of my life to get through the rule book and figure out how to play this game. It's got hundreds and hundreds of pieces, and we picked up Doom, the board game, not that long ago, which plays a lot like the video game. Got all these really cool miniatures that need to be painted, and really you're just, you're battling the demons from hell coming through this portal on Mars, and so these are the kinds of board games I like.
What I like is Halo and Doom are very Christian oriented video games.
I don't know anything about Halo, but Doom, yes, it definitely fits in that theistic universe.
Mass Effect seems more secular, but approach. But I don't know. I've seen in previous interviews that you liken our physical universe to the existence of the Matrix or the 13th floor.
Yeah,
Would
yeah,
you go further into that?
yeah. So, what's a good way to put this? So there's kind of this idea out there that's gaining popularity that we live in a simulation. That there seemed to be some, people were kind of awakened to that idea when the Matrix came out. When was that? 1999.
Back when life made sense.
And around that same time, there was a movie that came out called The 13th Floor that explores similar themes. It's really its own movie. It's different. People should watch it.
It made the mistake of being released a month later after that.
Yes. Oh, just the worst time. If it had been before that or significantly after, I think it would have gotten noticed. But it's worth watching. And now, as a Christian, I don't think we live in a simulated universe, meaning that we're plugged in somewhere, we're brains in a vat or something hallucinating this. I think the universe is real. I think we're actually experiencing things. However, I think there's a lot of validity to the idea that we are spiritual beings having something that could be kind of an analogous experience that, what is reality? And the more I think about it, and the more that I study the universe and you look at things like particle physics, quantum physics, even you look at things like DNA, epigenetics, Evo-Devo, which is a really interesting part of evolutionary biology, you start to come away with the impression that the universe is really just code. It's just information. And so while, like I code up computer simulations to test out some of my research ideas. Well, could God have done something similar? Could he have coded this whole thing up? It's a real experience. It's actually, analogously, maybe in his giant computer somewhere, who knows? But we're having this experience. And, you look at things um, like physical fields, like magnetic fields and things like this. And really, what are they? They're just information. It's instructions telling particles what to do. And I came away with a strong impression that the whole universe is really just information. It's just data, right? We're here having this experience, and it does make me think a lot, especially of the 13th floor, probably a bit more than the Matrix.
So and there's that one part in there's that one scene. It's sort of implied that these creative have souls of their own, but then he has an existential crisis and says that nothing I do, nothing I say will ever matter.
Yeah, so obviously I don't take the nihilistic view that it's all just, a simulation and it doesn't matter. It's real, but it raises the question of what exactly is a real physical world, and how do you have spiritual beings inhabiting that world? And it is sort of analogous to the Matrix. And the part of the 13th floor, and I'm going to spoil a little bit of it for people, they haven't watched it. So yeah, these characters find out that they're in this computer simulated world. And it's been years since I've watched it. And I think the way that one of the characters kind of figures this out is that he gets to a part of the simulation that hasn't been finished yet. And so it's just kind of, you just sort of see like this sort of frazzled, frayed end of reality there. And it made me think a little bit of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, which quantum physics interpretations do I like? And I tend to like the collapse interpretations, the ones that say that you've got these wave functions, and they don't collapse until they need to. So you've got particles, you've got all these different aspects of reality, according to these interpretations, that don't take on a definite form until the wave function collapses. And so you could say, well, maybe they don't collapse until somebody observes them, right? Schrodinger's cat, that kind of thing. You don't have a definite state for something until it needs to take a state. And it kind of made me think of that scene from the 13th floor, that it's not this goofy kind of new age thing that we can actually determine reality. It's just that reality doesn't need to take on a definite form until someone's going to partake of that bit of reality.
Oh yeah, another spoiler. Even though it's a simulation of 1999 and actually takes place 4 years from now. That's 2024.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Yes, the far, far.
I would actually imagine that this would be more or less a simulation of 1984.
Yes. Oh no.
Well, things are going somewhere between a mixture of Soylent Green, 1984, and Mad Max.
Yeah, isn't it fun? Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, since we got into the talk about socialism and stuff like that, have you noticed, in the media that anything that, I'm trying to think how to word this correctly, that reminds you of the ideology that you used to have, like with recent political stuff?
I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand the question.
I was saying, since you said you grew up more socialist.
Yes.
I was wondering, given how America and stuff seems to be more focusing on socialism and stuff like that, even in Canada, I believe, do you notice any similarities between, now and what you were taught as a kid being taught now?
Now, I have to say, in my parents' defense, that they did not introduce us to any overt politics until we were teenagers and were capable of, some basic reasoning. Teenagers aren't fully intellectually mature, but they can begin to understand things. And so that is the point at which I started to kind of be exposed to stuff. And by then, definitely my dad had become more libertarian, but just having grown up in a kind of soft socialist sort of environment in Canada, and then, my father teaching us the different ideologies. Yes, I mean, I could definitely see America stuff that is, to me, rather frightening. Now, I don't comment on like political parties or endorse candidates or anything like that, but I can speak in broad strokes and just say that, socialism is a substitute for God. It is people looking to the government to save them instead of for God to save them. And, I think we've seen ample examples throughout history, recent history, of how that tends to work out.
The all this woke shit is a full blown religion by now.
It's very much. And, and I was talking to someone about that today, and especially this whole cancel culture thing.
Yeah.
Like, what sort of hideous religion is this that
and the original sin of being
they
white?
You're born with the original sin, that you're born with some kind of privilege that you can't do anything about. And if you commit some kind of a transgression, some kind of sin, there's no forgiveness. You're canceled forever. You cannot redeem yourself. There's nothing you can do. You're condemned forever. And I would ask people to decide which sounds better to you, this human constructed religion of wokeness, or a religion where an infinitely loving creator recognizes that you are flawed, forgives you, has figured out a way to redeem you, and you'll get to spend all of eternity with him in joyful happiness. I mean, which sounds better?
And this act of canceling people and essentially making them an unperson, that
Yes,
concept 1984.
It is so dehumanizing. I find it terrifying, but at the same time, this person I was talking to today said, don't get too deep into despair, because ultimately American people are quite different than, say, the Soviets. That we are. It's going to play out much differently. We may not know exactly what's going to happen, but it will be different than it was in like the Soviet Union or in
China,
Cambodia.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it is a little terrifying to see people embrace that sort of thing. I think you have to have just like a real hatred of your fellow human beings to treat them like that.
Ironically, that's what Tacitus said about Christians.
Did he really?
Yeah, it's a religion about a hatred for mankind.
No, it's total opposite.
Because of the original sin and stuff like that. He didn't really.
Well, and not every Christian sect embraces that idea. But I mean,
he got his information from Jews, probably.
Okay, I have no idea, but no, it is not a hatred for humankind. At least not with the Christianity that I have been immersed in for the last 14 years.
I believe you had said your brother converted as well.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, it was really odd because my brother is as scientific as I am. He has a PhD in aerospace engineering. And, he's a super smart guy, really skeptical. We had both embraced objectivism equally intensely at the time. And so right around the time that I'm trying to decide if I want to become Christian or not, I'm deep into the study. I'm accepting it all, but, it's a pretty big leap. It's a big commitment to give yourself over to Jesus Christ. And so I'm kind of wrestling with this. And my brother and I were in grad school at the same time getting our PhDs, and we would have these daily chats on MSN. It's one of the messenger things. And I thought, I'm just going to tell him what's going on. I said, I'm thinking about becoming a Christian. And he said, what's to think about? You just do it. I did. And it was just like, holy cow, the last person on earth I would have ever guessed. And it turns out that in his lab, as a grad student, that he had met one of the guys he was working with was very committed Christian, and invited my brother to come to a men's Bible study group. And he just was really compelled by the message that he heard in this group, and decided to become Christian, and just We both became Christians within months of each other, completely independently of each other. And my dad was still atheist at the time, and he was just flabbergasted. How did I manage to produce two Christian children? I remember him asking. He just didn't quite understand it.
Yeah, and I remember in our last chat we actually said how you were a bit different than the typical story, because usually what we hear is that a person started off Christian, went to college, and then became an atheist.
Yep.
And you are the complete opposite of that.
Yes. Yes, it confuses people. They're not prepared to hear that. And I would say I get confusion equally from both sides, that atheists are like, how did that happen? Like my dad. Although I have to say that he actually was pleased for us. He just didn't understand it. And then from Christians, when they find out that I'm a scientist, and quite often will ask, well, so what do you think about God? And they're honestly often surprised to find out that I'm a believer. Because that's, yeah, like you said, that's the usual trajectory. I had a friend in grad school who was raised very Christian, and I think by the end of her freshman year in college, her faith was obliterated. That is much more common, at least that we hear about.
More like the secular public school system trope, but
Yeah.
What about the scientists being majority agnostics at least, or is that true, or is that just propaganda?
Okay, so the numbers that I have looked at, this includes a 2009 poll done by Pew, and then Elaine Eklund, who is a sociologist of religion at Rice University, who's looked into this quite a bit. So it turns out that about 40% of US scientists would say they do not believe in a personal God. Now, so that's a pretty sizable minority, but it is not the majority. And it breaks down for the rest of them. You end up with about 30% of US scientists saying that they believe in a personal God. You get, I think it's on the order of, gosh, I can't remember, like maybe 20%, 18% saying that they believe in some kind of higher power, just sort of vaguely. And then you've got a number of people who either don't know or just decline to answer. So you could ask the question, okay, so clearly it's not a majority of scientists, but 40% compared with what is the percentage of atheists in just sort of the general population? I don't know exactly. It's probably going to be less than 10%.
20%.
Yeah, it's a small number. So why that disparity? And that is something I'm actually quite interested in. And the nearest answer that I've come up with that makes sense is something along the lines of what William Lane Craig has said, which he calls cosmology religion for scientists, or religion, I think he said it was a religion for scientists or for physicists. And I agree with him. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. That is not meant to be insulting, because I was in that position myself, that having grown up with zero religion, and I mean zero, I never cracked open a Bible. I was never told a Bible story. The only thing I knew about Jesus is that he was this really nice guy who on Christmas we celebrate him as a baby for some reason, never stepped foot in the church. Okay. So having grown up with that, now also, though, as any normal human being would want, you want answers. Like, why are we here? What is this all about? Where do we fit into the grand scheme of things? And for me, lacking religion entirely, I found great comfort in just the universe, space. Having grown up with Carl Sagan's Cosmos on TV, watching Star Trek and Star Wars, to me, the idea of outer space and studying it was very comforting. I almost felt at home, like I so badly wanted to be in space. I thought I should be an astronaut, but
that's almost every kid until some of them
yeah.
want other things.
Well,
couldn't be an astronaut because you don't come from Ohio.
Yeah, the idea of actual space travel sounds pretty awful to me. Very claustrophobic. But anyway, I was looking for that sense of comfort and belonging and context in science. And I think what happens, it's not, Elaine Ecklund showed that fewer than 10% of American scientists claim that their scientific work made them less religious. So this idea that hordes of religious people go into the sciences and then they get turned into atheists, that doesn't happen. They show up as atheists already, like I did. And I think the reason they do that is because science is, they're thinking it's a way to answer these big questions. That's what I thought. And then I ended up finding God along the way. It's really, in a non-insulting way, I'll say this, it is like a religion for atheists. And I think that is why science draws 40%, atheists in the population like that.
I remember we also talked about this as well, but, me and you are both on the spectrum.
Yes.
And, I remember Hugh Ross also had brought up how he's on the spectrum.
Yes.
And he grew up and he had been feeling like, feeling so left alone that he didn't know another autistic person until he went to college, and then he became a scientist, and then he found a bunch of them.
Oh my gosh, yes, they call it Asperger's, the engineer's disease, because there is kind of the stereotype of, or like somebody like Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, right? Kind of an Asperger's person. Yeah.
Yeah. And we do know with autistic people from studies that they tend to be less religious on average.
Yes, that is right.
And there's actually neurological reasons for that, because a big thing that is with autistic people is they don't know faces really well. They can't personalize things.
Yes.
If they're not abstract.
I personally struggle to understand people's motives and intentions. I score really high on empathy, which I'm grateful for. I can read people's emotions very well. I just don't know why they're having them. That's my struggle.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about that, that could explain why there might be a little bit of a gap in the fields.
And there's also a problem I have, but I have to force myself to cry at funerals.
Oh no. Have you ever watched a show called The IT Crowd?
No.
Oh my goodness. If you have Netflix, you have got to watch The IT Crowd. It is a British comedy, and it's about the IT department at this big corporation. And one of the characters, there's an episode specifically about that he cannot cry at a funeral. And he needs to go there with his girlfriend. Her grandfather has died. And so he uses pepper spray on himself to make himself cry at the funeral. So, honestly, guys, you ought to watch it. It's a great show.
No, I got pepper.
My friend here, what he does is he just thinks of Aaron Ra's history videos. That does the trick every time.
That's funny.
And reading the comments just depresses the hell out of you that people are just that stupid and easily gullible.
Yes, but like the problem with this character in this show is that he used like 10 times strength pepper spray to make himself cry, and it was way too much. I would say that the same thing goes, if you read these comments, it's just it's too much. It'll take you past the point of tears and it's total despair.
Especially reading the comments on the Village Atheist Experience, they make you want to lose the will to live.
Oh no, yeah, that's why I just can't even look at that stuff. It's just, and it's not that stuff is convincing. It's that it's so bad. It's like, how can people actually say these things?
No, most of them are still stuck in 2008.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to leave off on this one comment because, since to go back to your little friend Hemet Mehta,
okay,
He had said after her tweet went viral, she responded with what appeared to be a slur aimed at people with Asperger's. You had said, like clockwork, here are the Spurgs. As
Uh-huh.
Eve says, why do atheists think that swarming my tweets does anything but prove that I really touched a nerve?
Yeah.
He's an SJW who, like,
Yes.
he'll throw out all kinds of shit, but then when you throw it back at him, he'll cry about it.
They do. They tend to do that. Yes. Now, as a person legitimately with Asperger's, and I test very strongly on that, uh, I don't see that as a slur. It is a word that means somebody who is paying an undue amount of attention to a detail that is not really relevant. Now, as a Spurg myself, a legitimate one, I don't take issue with people using the word that way. And that's clearly what I meant.
Well, we can also say that they're appropriating on our culture.
Cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation. That's right. My goodness, why didn't I think of that? I'm offended now. I'm offended at myself having used it. I appropriated it inappropriately.
And that's what humanists have done. Secular humanists have done, because humanism actually began as a religious movement in the Renaissance.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Well, we've came up on the hour mark. Is there any last thoughts you want to get out there, Imogen?
Any last thoughts?
Any last thoughts?
Or comments where the dear audience can find you?
Well, honestly, I had a really good time talking to you guys tonight. If you want to just continue the conversation, at another time, do a part 2.
Sure.
I'm entirely open to that. I don't really have a final remark other than to say this was actually kind of fun.
Good. Glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Yes, like listening to it.
So where can people find you?
Oh, they can find me on the Twitters. That's where I am mostly these days. I haven't posted anything on my blog in a long time. I'm writing a book. My first book, who knows when it's coming out? I just keep writing and writing and writing. And it's going to be about the most common scientific attacks against Christianity and how Christians can respond. I'm also hoping that seekers and even atheists would find some value in the book. And then the rest of my time gets eaten up by scientific research, but I have committed to being active on Twitter because I really enjoy engaging with people. So that's where people can find me.
I'm writing books. I'm hoping to release my magnum opus on the exact day of the guy from the 13th floor wakes, June 21st, 2024.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah. What I'm planning on, I already wrote one book before, and I'm planning on writing another book, but this time on Christianity and responding to critics.
Well, I got to say, Brass, I love a lot of your responses, especially to, what is it? Is it the Atheist Republic? Who's it's all these really...
Atheist Republic, that's a bunch, it's basically a troll organization.
Yes, okay, and I love your responses to those, Brass. They're gold.
Some people have speculated that it's actually
at this point.
Some people have actually
do a coffee table book with just the meme and then your commentary that goes along with it.
Some people have actually speculated that it's a Christian infiltrated parody account designed to make atheists look stupid.
It is credible because it is that bad. You want to be charitable, towards human beings, and that nobody could deliberately be that ridiculous.
I mean, and what's funny is I'll immediately get the bunch of comments right after I do that. I do my commentary on what they said, and I'll say, well, you're just a fundamentalist Christian apologist. I'm like,
oh my goodness, if only they knew. That's funny.
That comes from Fundy Atheists, by the way.
Yes.
And also, although it's funny because whenever I do something in the opposite direction, I'll hear a bunch of Christians that say, oh, well, you're just a heartless atheist.
Oh my goodness!
It's like the scholar Bart Ehrman says, like, if you got lunatics screeching at you from both sides, you're doing something right.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because he gets attacked by fundagelicals, and on the other side, he gets attacked by nutty Christmithers.
There you go. Oh my goodness. So you're just
Well, this was a
you're just
nice
having fun.
conversation. I love talking to you, like always.
Uh,
All right. Well,
All right, so all right, go find Sarah immediately. Follow her on Twitter and her blog, which she may update anytime. And we'll see you next time.